Cracks in silence. The alarm screamed through Station Meridian at exactly 3 in the morning. Valeth woke instantly, her diplomat training kicking in as she scrambled out of bed. Red emergency lights flashed through the quarters, and a robotic voice repeated the same message over and over. Critical atmospheric failure in Sector 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Toxic gas breach detected. She rushed to the common area and found it empty. Yunseo's room was already dark. His bed unmade. He was gone. Her communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Station Command. Diplomat Sareen, please proceed to Emergency Shelter 12. The situation is under control. What happened? She demanded. A chemical storage unit ruptured in the maintenance tunnels. The atmospheric systems are failing in Sector 7. We have repair teams working on the problem. Repair teams. Maintenance workers. Yunseo. Valeth's heart seized in her chest. She grabbed her communicator and opened a channel to station maintenance. Where is Engineer Park? She demanded. Yunseo Park, where is he? There was a pause. Then a tired voice answered. He volunteered for the primary repair team, Diplomat. He is currently inside the contaminated zone. Inside, is he protected? His suit is rated for the toxins. But the damage is severe. If the repairs are not completed within the hour, the entire sector will be lost. Veleth did not go to the emergency shelter. Instead, she ran towards Sector 7, ignoring every warning and every protocol. She was a diplomat, trained in negotiation and politics. She had faced hostile ambassadors and dangerous criminals, but she had never felt fear like this. The observation area outside Sector 7 was crowded with worried workers and station officials. Through the reinforced window, Veleth could see the contaminated zone. Thick green gas swirled through the corridors, and emergency lights cast everything in an eerie glow. And there, barely visible through the toxic cloud, was Yunseo. He worked with desperate speed, his gloved hands moving across damaged control panels. 2 other engineers worked beside him. But the repairs were taking too long. Every few minutes, another system failed, and the gas spread further. He has maybe 20 minutes of air left, someone beside her whispered. If he does not finish soon. Veleth pressed her hands against the glass. She wanted to call out to him, to tell him to leave, to save himself. But she knew he would not listen. This was who he was. This was what he did. He saved people, even at the cost of his own life. The minutes crawled by like hours. Veleth watched as Yunseo's movements grew slower, his body straining against the toxic environment. One of the other engineers collapsed and had to be dragged to safety. But Yunseo kept working. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the atmospheric systems roared back to life. Clean air flooded the sector, pushing back the green poison. Alarms fell silent one by one. Station Command announced success. Sector 7 was saved. But Yunseo did not emerge from the contaminated zone. Veleth watched as emergency medical teams rushed inside, and her heart stopped when they carried out an unconscious figure in a damaged environmental suit. She pushed through the crowd and ran to the medical bay. The doctors worked on Yunseo for 3 hours. He had suffered severe toxic exposure and oxygen deprivation. His lungs were damaged, his body weakened. But humans, the doctor said, were remarkably resilient creatures. He would survive. Veleth sat beside his bed through the night and into the next day. She held his hand, something she had never done before. His fingers were calloused from years of manual labor, scarred from countless repairs. But they were warm, and she found strange comfort in their strength. When he finally woke, his first words were not for himself. Is everyone safe? He asked, his voice rough and weak. Did we save the sector? Yes. Veleth whispered. Everyone is safe. Because of you. He smiled then, a small and tired smile. Good. That is good. He fell asleep again, still holding her hand. A voice interrupted her vigil. Another human engineer, a woman named G1, stood in the doorway with tears in her eyes. Is he going to be okay? G1 asked. The doctors say he will recover. G1 nodded, relief flooding her face. Then she said something that changed everything. He is a fool, you know. He always puts himself in danger for others. He has been like this for 10 years. Ever since he first saw you. Velith froze. What did you say? G1's eyes widened, realizing she had revealed something she should not have. I mean, what do you mean, 10 years? How long has he known about me? G1 looked away. He never stopped talking about you. The Valorian diplomat who showed kindness to human refugees. He transferred to this station just to be near you. He learned your language, your customs. He waited a decade for any chance to help you, even knowing you would never notice him. Velith's mind reeled. 10 years. He had loved her for 10 years. Why did he never say anything? Because he did not want anything from you. G1 said softly, he just wanted you to be happy, even if that happiness had nothing to do with him. Velith looked down at her husband, this quiet man who had given everything and asked for nothing. She thought about every small kindness, every silent gesture, every moment he had protected her without her knowledge. She thought about 10 years of love carried in secret, expecting no reward. And for the first time in her life, Velith began to cry. She did not understand. These tears. Valorians were not supposed to weep over emotions. But as she held UNCO's hand and watched him sleep, she realized something had changed inside her. The walls around her heart were cracking, and through those cracks, something bright and warm was beginning to shine. The arrangement, the grand hall of station. Meridian glowed with 1,000 floating lights as diplomats from across the galaxy gathered for the annual Unity ceremony. Velith stood near the observation window, her silver skin catching the starlight as she watched the crowd below with tired eyes. She was beautiful by any species standard, with flowing white hair and eyes like liquid gold. Her elegant robes marked her as a diplomat of the Valorian people, a species known throughout the galaxy for their logic and cold precision. But tonight, Velith felt no pride in her position. Tonight, she felt only dread. You must choose a mate before the next lunar cycle, her mother had declared just hours ago. The council demands it. Our family's alliance with House Torvine depends on your marriage. Velith had wanted to scream. She had wanted to refuse. But Valorians did not act on emotion. They calculated, planned, and accepted what logic demanded. The problem was simple. Every suitable Valorian male came with political complications. Marry one house and you offend another. Accept one alliance and you break 3 more. It was an impossible puzzle with no solution. So she stood alone, watching aliens of every species celebrate beneath her, wondering how her life had become such a trap. She did not notice the human watching her from across the hall. Yuncio Park had learned long ago how to be invisible. As a maintenance engineer on Station Meridian, invisibility was practically his job description. He fixed broken systems, repaired damaged panels, and kept the station running while diplomats and merchants walked past him without a second glance. He preferred it that way. Or at least, he told himself he did. But his eyes always found her. For 10 years now, his eyes had always found her. He remembered the first time he saw Velith. It was during the Exodus crisis, when human refugees fled the destruction of Colony 7. Thousands of humans had crowded into emergency shelters on this very station, hungry and afraid and forgotten by a galaxy that did not care about their suffering. Most aliens had looked away. Some had even complained about the smell, the noise, the inconvenience of human desperation. But not Velith. Yunseo had watched her kneel beside a dying human child. He had watched her hold the boy's hand and speak soft words of comfort. She had stayed until the child passed, and then she had wept. A Valorian diplomat, weeping for a human child she had never met. In that moment, Yunseo's heart was no longer his own. 10 years. He had loved her in silence for 10 years. He had transferred to her station, learned her language, memorized her schedule. He knew her favorite tea, her preferred temperature settings, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. He knew everything about her, and she did not even know his name. It was pathetic, he often told himself. It was foolish and hopeless and utterly human. But he could not stop. He had tried. He had tried so many times. But his heart refused to listen to reason. Tonight, however, something was different. He had heard rumors in the lower decks. Whispers about the Valorian diplomat and her family's demands. They said she was being forced into a political marriage. They said she had no good options, no way out. Yunseo's hands trembled as a wild idea took shape in his mind. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. But what if he could help her, just this once, before disappearing back into the shadows where he belonged? He took a deep breath and began walking toward her. Velith did not notice the human approaching until he stood directly before her. He was unremarkable by any measure, with simple clothes and a worker's badge. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his eyes held a strange mixture of fear and determination. "Diplomat Sareen," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I apologize for the interruption. I have a proposal that may solve your current situation." Velith raised an eyebrow. How did this human know about her situation? Why would a maintenance worker approach a diplomat at a formal ceremony? "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Yunseo Park. I work in atmospheric systems maintenance, and I would like to offer myself as your husband." Velith stared at him. Surely she had misheard. "Excuse me. You need a marriage that carries no political complications," he continued. "A human husband would be considered beneath alliance concerns. No Valorian house would feel threatened or offended. Your family obligations would be satisfied, and you would be free to continue your work without interference." Velith's mind raced. It was logical, disturbingly logical. A human spouse would be so far beneath political consideration that no one would care. "What do you want in return?" she demanded. No one offered something for nothing. Yunseo shook his head. "Nothing. I asked for nothing. I simply saw someone who needed help, and I am in a position to provide it." It made no sense. Every instinct told Velith to refuse. But the logic was sound, and her options were gone. "You understand this would not be a true marriage," she said carefully. "There would be no expectation of affection or intimacy. I understand. You would gain no status, no wealth, no advancement. I understand." Velith studied him for a long moment. His face revealed nothing, but his hands were shaking. Why were his hands shaking? "Very well," she said finally. "I accept your proposal." Yunseo bowed his head. "Thank you, Diplomat Sorin. You honor me." He turned and walked away before she could see the tears forming in his eyes. 10 years of love, 10 years of silence, and now he would be her husband. Not in the way he dreamed, but close enough to protect her. It was enough. It had to be enough. Velith watched him disappear into the crowd and felt a strange flutter in her chest. She dismissed it as anxiety about her decision. She did not know that she had just married a man who had loved her for a decade. She did not know that her simple act of kindness, years ago, had captured a human heart forever. But she would learn. In time, she would learn everything. The quiet husband, 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Vela still could not understand her husband. The ceremony had been small and practical, witnessed only by the required officials. Yansio had signed the documents with steady hands and spoken his vows in perfect Valorian. Velith had been surprised by his fluency, but she had not asked where he learned her language. Now, they shared quarters on the diplomatic level, a privilege granted through her position. Yanseo had insisted on taking the smaller room, the one meant for servants. He rose before dawn each day and returned after dark. He ate his meals quietly, cleaned up after himself, and never intruded on her space. He was, in every way, the perfect invisible husband. And it was driving Velith absolutely mad. She noticed things. Small things at first, then bigger ones. Her favorite Valorian tea, imported from her homeworld at great expense, always appeared in the cabinet before she ran out. Her workspace chair had been adjusted to the exact angle that relieved her chronic back tension. The temperature in her room was always set to her preferred setting, even though she had never told anyone what that setting was. How did he know? How did he know everything? One evening, she decided to wait for him. She sat in the common area, pretending to read a diplomatic report, until she heard the door open. Yansio entered quietly, still wearing his maintenance uniform. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and grease stains on his hands. When he saw her waiting, he stopped in surprise. "Diplomat Soreen," he said, using the formal address he always used. "Is something wrong? Do you need assistance?" "Sit down," Velith commanded. "I wish to speak with you." He hesitated for just a moment before taking a seat across from her. His posture was perfect, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He looked like a man awaiting judgment. "I have questions," Velith began. "How did you know my preferred temperature setting?" Yansio blinked. "I work in atmospheric systems. I had access to historical data from your previous quarters." "MIT. How did you know what brand I prefer?" "I observed the packaging in the recycling system during my maintenance rounds." "And my chair." "The exact angle from my back." "You mentioned discomfort during a council meeting 3 years ago." I remembered the details. Velith stared at him. 3 years ago. He remembered something she had said 3 years ago. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do you do all this? You ask for nothing in return for this marriage. You work long hours and come home to cook and clean. You have gained nothing from this arrangement. So why?" Yanisio was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You needed help. I could help. That is reason enough. That is not a complete answer. It is the only answer I can give." Velith wanted to press further, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was pain there, hidden beneath layers of calm acceptance. She had seen that look before, in refugees who had lost everything but kept moving forward anyway. "Very well," she said finally. "But I want you to stop calling me Diplomat Soreen. My name is Velith. If we are to be married, you should use it." Yansio looked up, and for just a second, something like wonder flickered across his face. "Velith," he said softly, as if tasting the word. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me." He excused himself to shower and sleep, leaving Velith alone with her confusion. The next week, she began watching him more carefully. She learned that he often gave his lunch rations to hungry workers in the lower decks. She discovered that he spent his rest days repairing equipment for species too poor to afford professional services. She found out that he treated every being on the station with the same quiet respect, whether they were admirals or janitors. The other aliens did not appreciate him. She overheard conversations in the diplomatic halls, mocking whispers about the Valorian who married beneath her station. "Did you hear about Soreen? She actually wed a human laborer." How desperate she must have been. The poor creature probably does not even understand proper table manners. Velith felt anger rise in her chest, an emotion she quickly suppressed. Valorians did not act on anger, but she noticed something else. She noticed that Yunseo overheard these comments too. He was working on a nearby panel when a group of Torvine diplomats loudly discussed his inadequacy as a husband. He said nothing. His hands did not shake. His expression did not change. He simply finished his work and walked away. That night, Velith found him on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "You heard them," she said, joining him at the window. "I hear many things," he replied. "It does not matter what they say about me. It only matters that you are protected." Protected from what? From political enemies. From family pressure. From a marriage you did not want. He turned to look at her. "You deserve to live your life on your own terms. If enduring a few insults helps achieve that, it is a small price." Velith felt something crack inside her chest. In all her years of diplomatic service, no one had ever put her well-being above their own. Not her colleagues, not her allies, not even her own family. But this quiet human, this invisible maintenance worker, endured mockery and asked for nothing in return. "You are a strange man, Yunseo Park," she said softly. "I am only human," he replied with a small smile. "We are all a little strange." That night, for the first time, Velith could not stop thinking about her husband. She wondered what other secrets he carried behind those calm, patient eyes. She wondered if she truly knew him at all. And somewhere deep in her heart, a feeling she could not name began to grow. She did not recognize it as love, not yet. But it was there, taking root, waiting to bloom. Just as Yunseo had waited, patiently and silently, for 10 long years. 10 years of silency. Yunseo remembered the exact moment his heart was stolen. It was during the Exodus crisis, when the destruction of Colony 7 sent thousands of human refugees flooding into Station Meridian. The station was not prepared for such numbers. People slept in corridors, fought for scraps of food, and died from neglect while the galaxy looked away. Yunseo was young then, barely 20 years old. He worked in the refugee camps, distributing supplies and comforting the dying. Every day brought new horrors, new losses, new reasons to despair. Then he saw her. Velith Saurian had come to the camps as part of a diplomatic inspection. Most of the alien officials walked through quickly, covering their faces against the smell of human suffering. They made notes on their tablets and hurried back to their comfortable quarters. But Velith stopped. A human child lay dying on a thin mat, abandoned by parents who could not bear to watch. The boy was maybe 6 years old, his body wasted by disease, his eyes empty of hope. No one expected him to last the night. Velith knelt beside him. She took his small hand in hers and began to speak softly in perfect human English. "You are not alone," she told the boy. "You are brave and strong, and you are not alone." She stayed for 3 hours. She held his hand as his breathing grew weaker. She told him stories about the stars, about worlds he would never see. And when he finally passed, she wept. A Valorian diplomat, weeping for a human child she had never met. Yunseo watched from across the room, and something inside him broke open. In that moment, he saw the purest form of compassion. In that moment, he fell in love. He never spoke to her that day. He was too young, too low, too invisible. But he made a silent vow to himself. He would find a way to protect this beautiful soul. He would spend his life being worthy of her kindness, even if she never knew his name. Year 1 passed, then year 2. Yunseo worked and saved and studied. He applied for a transfer to Vela Station and was rejected 4 times before finally being accepted. He took a lower position than his skills deserved, just to be assigned to her sector. By year 4, he could see her almost every day. He memorized her schedule, her habits, her preferences. He watched her navigate the treacherous waters of galactic politics with grace and wisdom. She never noticed him. He was just another worker in the background, invisible as always. By year 7, he had learned her language. He studied Valorian customs, traditions, and beliefs. He read every book she was reported to have read. He wanted to understand her, to know her world as she knew it. Still, he said nothing. What could he say? He was a maintenance worker, a nobody. She was a respected diplomat from an advanced species. The gap between them was wider than the space between stars. By year 10, he had accepted his fate. He would love her in silence forever. He would protect her from the shadows, help her in ways she would never notice, and be content with just the sight of her smile. Then he heard about the marriage crisis. When Nuncio learned that Velith was being forced into a political marriage, something inside him snapped. He could not stand by and watch her be trapped. He could not let her suffer when he had the power to help. So he stepped forward, offered himself as a solution, and expected nothing in return. Now, 3 days after the accident, Velith sat beside his hospital bed and demanded the truth. G1 told me everything, she said, her voice trembling. She told me about the refugee camp. She told me you have loved me for 10 years. Is it true? Yancio closed his eyes. He had always known this moment might come. He had prepared himself for her disgust, her rejection, her demand that he leave her life forever. Yes, he said simply. It is true. Why? Why did you never say anything? Why did you hide this from me? He opened his eyes and looked at her. She was crying again, silver tears streaming down her perfect face. He had never seen her so emotional, so raw. Because my love was never about getting something in return, he said softly. I loved you because of who you are, not because I wanted you to love me back. I was happy just being near you, just helping you when I could. That was enough for me. That is not logical, Velith protested. That is not how relationships work. There must be exchange, balance, mutual benefit. That is not how human love works, Yunseo replied. Real love does not keep score. Real love does not demand payment. It just gives freely and completely, without expecting anything in return. Velith stared at him. In all her years of studying alien species, she had never encountered anything like this. Valorians married for alliances, for status, for logical advantage. The concept of loving someone for a decade without hope of reciprocation was utterly foreign. How can you love someone who did not even know you existed? She whispered. Because knowing you existed was enough, Yunseo said. Every time I saw you smile, my heart felt full. Every time I helped you without your knowledge, I felt purpose. You gave my life meaning, Velith. That was more than I ever dared to ask for. Velith reached out and touched his face. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, so different from Valorian coldness. I do not understand humans, she admitted. I do not understand you. You do not have to understand, Yunseo said gently. You just have to know that someone in this universe loves you completely, without conditions, without expectations. Whatever you decide, that love will not change. I will wait another 10 years, or 20, or 100. Time does not matter to a human heart. Velith leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. It was a Valorian gesture of deep intimacy, rarely shared even between married couples. Yunseo gasped in surprise. I do not know what I feel, Velith confessed. I am confused and frightened and overwhelmed. But I know that I do not want to lose you. I know that when you were hurt, I felt something break inside me. That might be love, Yunseo whispered. Perhaps, Velith agreed. I think I need time to find out. I have already waited 10 years, he said with a weak smile. I can wait a little longer. And for the first time, Velith smiled back at him. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile. But it was real. And to Yun Seo, it was worth every moment of those 10 silent years. No longer silence. The great council chamber of Station Meridian had not seen such a gathering in decades. Representatives from every major species filled the curved benches, their eyes fixed on the central platform where Velisarine stood alone. Holographic screens displayed her face to millions across the galaxy. This was supposed to be a routine marriage review, a simple verification of her union with Yunisio Park. But her political enemies had turned it into a trial. The evidence is clear, declared Ambassador Torvan, his scaled face twisted in contempt. This marriage is a fraud, a manipulation by a human who sought to elevate himself through deception. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Velith felt anger burn in her chest, but she kept her expression calm. The human worker targeted diplomat Soreen during a moment of weakness, Torvin continued. He exploited her political difficulties to insert himself into her life. This council must annul the marriage immediately. Velith looked across the chamber to where Yun Seo sat in the public gallery. He had recovered from his injuries, but still looked pale and tired. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small nod. He was ready to accept whatever happened. He had already told her that she should annul the marriage if it would protect her career. He was willing to disappear back into the shadows, to love her from afar as he had always done. But Velith was done with silence. "May I speak?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. The council fell quiet. Ambassador Torvin nodded smugly, clearly expecting her to agree to the annulment. Velith stepped forward and looked out at the assembled representatives. For a moment, she was silent, gathering her thoughts. Then she began. "You say this marriage is a fraud. You say my husband manipulated me. Let me tell you the truth about Yun Seo Park." She paused, letting her words sink in. 10 years ago, during the Exodus crisis, this man watched me comfort a dying human child. He saw me weep for a boy I had never met. And in that moment, something changed in him. He did not approach me. He did not try to gain my attention. Instead, he spent the next decade loving me in complete silence. Whispers echoed through the chamber. Velith raised her hand for quiet. He transferred to my station and took a position beneath his abilities. He learned my language, my customs, my preferences. He memorized every detail of my life, not to manipulate me, but to find small ways to help me without my knowledge. She turned to face Ambassador Torvin directly. When my family demanded I marry, when I had no options and no hope, he stepped forward. He offered himself as my husband, asking nothing in return. No status, no wealth, no advancement. Just the chance to protect me from a situation I could not escape. That is not manipulation, Ambassador. That is sacrifice. Velith's voice grew stronger as she continued. 3 weeks ago, this man nearly died saving Sector 7. He volunteered for the most dangerous repair job because that is who he is. He puts others before himself every single time, without hesitation. She looked out at the council, meeting the eyes of species after species. You think you understand humans. You think they are simple, emotional, primitive. But you are wrong. Humans possess something that most species cannot comprehend. They can love without expecting anything in return. They can wait years, decades, entire lifetimes for someone who may never notice them. They can sacrifice everything for a stranger and call it natural. This is not weakness. This is strength beyond anything our species have achieved. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even Ambassador Torvin looked uncertain. Velith turned to face Yun So. His eyes were wide, his lips slightly parted in shock. She smiled at him, a real and warm and loving smile. "I stand before this council not to defend a marriage of convenience," she declared. "I stand here to celebrate a marriage of choice. I choose Yunseo Park, not because I need political protection, not because I have no other options, but because he has taught me what love truly means." She walked toward him, climbing the steps to the public gallery. Every eye in the chamber followed her. Every eye in the chamber followed her. "He loved me for 10 years without hope," she said, stopping before him. "Now I ask him to love me for the rest of our lives, with all the hope in the universe." Yunseo stared at her, tears streaming down his face. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Velith reached down and took his hand, pulling him to his feet. "No more silence," she whispered. "Not between us. Never again." "Velith," he finally managed, his voice cracking. "I do not understand." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She pulled him into an embrace, right there before the entire council. His arms wrapped around her, trembling with emotion. She felt his tears on her shoulder and realized she was crying too. The chamber erupted. Some species gasped in shock, others applauded. Still others simply stared in confused wonder. But the overwhelming response was something unexpected. It was admiration. Even the coldest, most logical species could recognize what they were witnessing. This was not politics or manipulation. This was something pure, something rare, something beautiful. Ambassador Torvine sat down in silence, his objections forgotten. The council voted unanimously to recognize the marriage. Later that night, Velith and Yunseo stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the endless stars. Their hands were intertwined, their shoulders touching, their futures finally united. 10 years, Velith said softly. "You waited 10 years for me." "I would have waited forever," Yunseo replied. "I know," she said. "That is what makes you extraordinary." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he held her close. Across the galaxy, species would continue to study humans. They would analyze human warfare, human science, human ambition. They would try to understand how such a young species could accomplish so much. But they would never fully grasp the greatest human power of all. The power to love in silence, to wait without hope, and to give everything while asking for nothing. That was humanity's true strength. And on Station Meridian, one quiet engineer and one brilliant diplomat had proven it to the stars. Their love story would be told for generations. Not as a tale of politics or power, but as a reminder that the smallest gestures could carry the greatest meaning, and that some silences, when finally broken, could echo throughout eternity.